After the bus came to a stop, I told Ali that I would be right back, and I headed down the steps to the snow-covered road. Arvin and Laura were behind the bus, looking at the tracks in the snow.
"I think they went in the same direction we're going,"
said Arvin. Laura was looking at a section of snow where it looked like the tyre tracks had slid across the ground. "Look over here," she said. "It looks like they slid when they were turning right on this street," she said, pointing to our left. I looked at the indentations in the snow and tried to picture the car going in either direction. "I think you're right," I said. "It looks like there was more than one vehicle. What if they were being chased? They took this turn way too quickly."
"So, do we follow the tracks, or keep going where we're headed?"
Arvin asked. "If they are in danger, then maybe we can help," I said. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and held down the button. "Is anyone there?" We all waited in silence for a minute, but no one responded. "We have to think about everyone else on the bus," said Laura. "If we try to help whoever is out there, we could be putting everyone else in danger." I wasn't sure how I felt. My mind kept going back to Ali and Clara hiding alone in the school. "Is there somewhere close by where we can take everyone and then come back?" I asked.
"There are a lot of big houses and lots around here,"
said Arvin.
"We could try to find a safe one and send some people back."
I tried the walkie-talkie again. Still no response. We should hurry, in case there is still a chance of saving whoever's out there. When we got back on the bus, Laura gathered everyone's attention before sharing our plan. There were no objections to the plan, so Arvin got back behind the wheel and drove on down the road. Arvin handled the bus carefully around the curves and hills of the snow-covered road. We passed a few long driveways leading to houses with large open yards beyond the trees. After driving a little further, we came across a shorter driveway with a large house nestled in the trees. The bus slowed to a halt before the driveway and then turned in. The large pine trees, sprinkled in with the leafless trees, provided additional privacy for the house. The doors were closed on the detached 3-car garage, which looked like it had some living quarters above it. The house was older, but seemed to be in good shape. This looked to be a great place to accommodate our whole group. Arvin parked the bus, leaving room in front of the garage so a car could be driven out. Mrs. Barnes and Jessica volunteered to go check out the house for safety before we all went in. Ali took a notebook and pen out of her backpack and began playing the dot game with Clara to pass the time. Jessica and Mrs. Barnes went up to the front door, but it was locked. They looked in the windows and then went around the house to the backyard. I stepped outside the bus and onto the snowy ground. The wind stung my face, making my eyes water as I looked around. The smooth, untouched snow all around the front yard gave me comfort that no one had been here recently. In between gusts of wind, the quiet was almost peaceful. But I wanted to hear cars driving by. I wanted to hear kids out playing in the snow. I wanted things to go back to how they were before March 2020. Before we saw a greater divide between the selfless and the selfish. On one side, we had the frontline doctors, nurses, and hospital staff that put their health at risk to help others, along with the store workers and delivery drivers working extra hard to make sure people had food and other necessities. And then you had the other side, those that refused to do the very simple action of wearing a mask that could help protect others and the ultra-crazies who call COVID a hoax. Then, I thought about the unnecessary loss of lives due to people refusing to listen to science and a complete lack of a plan from those in charge. And then things got even worse, when these routes appeared and people began to change. I wondered what the rest of the world was like. I also wondered how many people would refuse to believe that people were changing, and the routes. The front door opening brought me back to the present situation. "Joe, come here! You need to see this!" Jessica shouted. I ran through the snow and into the house. The foyer was large and open with a double curved staircase leading up to the second floor. Everything looked neat and organised as they led me past the office and through the spacious kitchen. It was cold and quiet in the house, and nothing happened when I flicked a switch on the wall. "You might want to pull your shirt over your nose," Mrs. Barnes said. Then she proceeded to open the basement door. I had thought it smelled a little bad when I first entered the house, but it was much worse once the door was opened. "Is that vinegar?" I asked. Jessica nodded before going down the stairs. The sour scent got worse with each step as we made it to the bottom of the nicely furnished basement. Light came in through the daylight windows, allowing us to make our way past the pool table on the exercise equipment. Mrs. Barnes opened another door, which led to a hard cement floor and a furnace. She turned on her flashlight and pointed it at the shriveled, unmoving tentacles lying on the floor. "Do you think the vinegar killed them?" I asked. "Either that or the salt," Mrs. Barnes said, shining the light on the empty pile of rock salt bags and a couple of shovels that must have been used to spread it out on the roots. I wondered if it was just the salt or a combination of the salt and the vinegar that killed them. "Anyone know where the salt trucks go to get filled up?" I asked. They both shook their heads. "I think there is a Trev Arrow Hardware somewhat close to here. I don't know if they would have gotten their winter salt supply before things changed, but they should at least have a bunch of water softener salt." "We can check the garage for a car and have a group go out there," said Mrs. Barnes. "But we'll have to find a different place to stay. This smell is horrendous." We all headed back upstairs and outside into the chilly day. After updating the rest of the group on the bus, we got a few volunteers to head over to the hardware store for the salt. There was an SUV in the garage, and the keys were found pretty quickly in a kitchen drawer. Before sending the volunteer crew on their way, Jessica and Mrs. Barnes ran through the snow to the house next door to see if that would be better. The house ended up being safe and was large enough to accommodate our group. It wasn't as nice as the school, but no one was complaining. After we moved the bus over to the other house and sent the volunteers on their way, we checked out the garage and found another car. Jessica said what I'd been thinking as well. "It looks like these standalone houses fared better than the neighbourhoods. I wonder if the people who lived here got away." "No one's come to help us though," I said. "So either they didn't get out or got somewhere safe, but weren't able to send help." "This has been going on for so long," Arvin said. "If no one has come to save us, I wonder if they ever will, and I wonder how far this has spread." We were all silent for a moment before jumping back to the task at hand. "Okay, who is going to go look for that other car?" Arvin asked. I looked around the living room, where only a few of us had gathered, and everyone looked worn out and defeated. Jessica and Trish both offered to go. Everyone else in the room remained silent. Arvin looked over at his family, who were huddled together on the couch. "I need to stay with them," he said to Jessica. Ali was sitting on the floor with Clara, and I knew I couldn't leave her again, even though I wanted to help. "It will be okay. Trish and I can handle this," said Jessica. Arvin and I helped them pack up and made sure they had guns, walkie-talkies, and other supplies. We walked them out to the car and made them promise to return safely. After they pulled out of the driveway and were out of view, Arvin and I returned to the house. The time passed slowly as I sat and played cards with Ali and Clara. We played a few rounds of kings in the corner and crazy eights. After the girls grew tired of cards, they stood up and left to explore the house together. I checked in with Jessica and Trish, who had only been gone for about 20 minutes. They said they were still following the tracks and were taking it slowly down a dirt road. As soon as they saw something, they said they would reach back out. I still couldn't believe how long this had been going on, and I was sure things could never go back to normal, even if we were eventually rescued. There was a bit of hope after seeing what the salt did to the roots in the basement of the house next door, but I wondered what happened to the people that did it. Maybe they got away, or maybe they found another house to bunker down in that didn't smell like vinegar. "We found something," said Trish's staticky voice through the radio. "There's a huge house up ahead with a bunch of cars in the driveway." "Do you see anyone outside?" I asked. "No, but the cars are parked haphazardly," said Trish. "It looks like they—" "Jessica, look out!" Arvin ran over by me. "What is happening?" he asked. "Trish! Jessica! Are you okay?" I shouted into the radio. I stood there staring at the speaker, waiting for a reply. The silence went on for way too long. "Jessica! Trish!" "What should we do?" asked Arvin. No one ran over, saying they would go out and help them, and I couldn't blame them. Everyone had been through so much at the school, and since this whole mess started. I didn't know what to say. Then, I felt a tug on my shirt. "Dad, we have to help them," said Ali. "They would come looking for us if you were out there." I hadn't seen her come back in the room, but I knew she was right. But what if they were already dead, or changed, and we would just be going out to join them? I looked over at Arvin.
We don't know if they can even be saved,
he said. I called out again on the radio and waited. There was still no reply. As much as I felt like I had to go, I couldn't risk it if we didn't know whether or not they were okay. I knelt down to try to explain it to Ali when a series of beeps came through the radio. "What is that, Dad?" Ali asked. I didn't realise they still had the Morse code button on kids' walkie-talkies. I remember using it with friends when I was little, and the only sequence I remembered was the 3 short beeps, followed by 3 long beeps, and then 3 short beeps again for SOS. The beeps coming out now didn't seem to be any particular pattern, but whatever happened, they must be in trouble and not able to talk. "It's Morse code," I said to Ali. She thought for a moment and then smiled. "Oh, like that machine we saw at the museum. I got it to spell my name on the computer," she said, while remembering a much happier time. "Just like that," I said. "What are they saying with it?" she asked. "I don't think they are saying anything other than letting us know that they must be okay, but are in trouble," I said. "I'll get our backpacks," she said. We had made it this far together, and I couldn't leave her side again, so I felt I didn't have a choice but to go and take her with me. "We'll come with you too," another voice chimed in. I looked over to see Mrs. Barnes and her daughter with the rifles and coats in hand, ready to go. "Okay, let's go," I said. The group in the SUV had just returned and were unloading everything into the garage. They had found a lot of bags of salt, some food, and other supplies. We explained what we were doing and they wished us luck, and then we went on our way. I drove with Mrs. Barnes in the passenger seat and the kids in the back. It was easy to follow the path they took, with all the snow on the road. "Stop!" Mrs. Barnes shouted. "Is that the car they took?" I hit the brakes a little too hard and we slid through the snow, coming to rest on the side of the road. Down a hill, a ways ahead of us, was a car on its side, blocking most of the road. "I think it is their car," I said. There were some people standing on the other side of the car. It didn't look like they'd noticed us yet. "Dad, are they stuck in the car?" Ali asked. "I think so. We'll need to draw them away so we can help get them out," I said. After fishing my binoculars out of my backpack, I tried to get a better view of what we were facing. There were 3 people there, but they were just standing there, looking at the car. They weren't doing anything. "They're not moving. It looks like they are just staring at the ground, waiting for something." I scanned ahead through the binoculars and followed the road as it went up another hill and veered to the left. At the corner, there was a house with a packed driveway. That must be the house they were talking about. The cars were all over the place in the driveway and the yard. "There are people outside of there too," I said. After adjusting the focus on the binoculars, I could tell that these ones were looking at the ground too. "I think something is about to happen. It is the same thing at the house, like they are waiting for something." "We'd better hurry and do something then," Mrs. Barnes said. "I think we can get a clear shot at the 3 people from here. Let's go, Carolyn." They got out of the car and left the doors open. Mrs. Barnes walked over the snow with her daughter and they lined up for a shot. After about a minute of careful aiming, they both fired their guns. Anyone or anything nearby was likely to be coming our way quickly after the sound of 2 gunshots going off. I looked through the binoculars again and only saw one person, who was quickly heading around the car and towards us. It looked like they would be in danger of hitting the car if they missed, so I was glad that they waited until he was closer before shooting again. The person went down into the red splattered snow as another shot went off. I looked back up at the house and there were now more people outside. Some of them stayed in the yard, still looking at the ground, while others stared down the street. "Quick, get in!" I shouted. As they ran back to the car, I saw more and more people filing out of the front door and the garage. Some were heading to the cars. I quickly put the car in drive and drove down the hill right when the door slammed shut. "The cars are backing out of the driveway," Mrs. Barnes said. I got as close to the car as I could and saw that the door was trying to be pushed open. Mrs. Barnes and I jumped out of the car and climbed on the hood of our car for better access to their door. She grabbed the door and pushed it open. "Are you 2 okay in there?" I shouted. "We're still ourselves, and alive at least," I heard Trish say. as she started to climb out of the upturned side of the car. I grabbed her hands and helped her over and onto the ground. Jessica started climbing up, but was moving slower. It looked like she had hurt one of her arms, so I tried to carefully help her. Trish helped me, and we were able to get her out and onto the ground. "The cars are coming!" Ali yelled to us. There were a bunch of people running and getting closer, and 3 cars had backed into the street and were turning around. We ran back to the car, and Mrs. Barnes helped Jessica into the front passenger seat and then joined Trish and the girls in the back seat. The car tyres spun in the snow as I put it in reverse and stepped on the gas. Luckily, it started to move as I eased up a bit on the pedal. Quickly turning the car around, we sped back up the hill through some untouched snow before getting back to the tracks we had made on the way here. There was a loud crunching of metal, and I looked into the rearview mirror to see the first car push the overturned car partly out of the way. There were 2 more vehicles coming a little ways behind it. The next car also hit the overturned car, pushing it further out of the way. They were not driving cautiously at all, which I thought would give them a huge advantage over me. I sped through the snow and around the curvy neighbourhood road. Mrs. Barnes used her radio to call back to the others and let them know that it picked up Jessica and Trish, but were being chased. There was a pretty sharp turn coming up that I slowed down for. In the rearview mirror, I could see that the other cars weren't slowing down at all, so I sped up on the turn a little more and somehow avoided being crashed into. Jessica groaned in pain and Ali and Carolyn screamed while our vehicle fishtailed back and forth before I gained control again. The first vehicle behind us turned way too fast and spun out into the yard. The next one followed suit and slid into the other car. But the third vehicle, a pickup truck, turned easier and powered through the snow-covered yard and back onto the road behind us. I could see the other 2 cars trying to go again before they went out of view on a much more gentle turn. Up ahead, the road continued straight for a while, so I stepped on it and gained some distance from the truck. Only one of the other cars came into view and was trying to catch up to us. "How are we going to get away?" Ali asked. I didn't want to lead them back to the house in case there were more cars that had left the house to come after us. We could probably defend ourselves from a few cars, but I didn't want to take the chance. "We'll find a way," I said, and kept my focus darting from in front of us to the rearview mirror. The straightaway was soon coming to an end, and the truck behind us was gaining some ground. I slowed down for the curve and heard the truck's engine get louder. It sped up and rammed into us, sending us sliding across the road and into someone's yard. We span part way around, and I was able to use that to head us back towards the road and around the curve. The truck slid past us and further into the deep snow of the road. While the truck was trying to turn around, we continued on quickly, putting more distance between our pursuers and us. "There's a street up ahead in the right," said Jessica. "Maybe you can lose them through here before getting back on the dirt road." Mrs. Barnes looked behind us. "Looks like that truck finally made it back on the road," she said. It was still a good distance back when I turned right down the next road. It was a neighbourhood with big yards and a good amount of trees. I knew the houses were older before even seeing them. More neighbourhoods were being created before things changed, and in all of them, they could just clear away the trees and build the houses as closely together as possible. They still could have made plenty of money, making the yards bigger and saving a lot of the trees. We were coming up to a yield sign and could either go straight or right. I turned us right again. The truck could no longer be seen in the rearview mirror. I didn't realise how fast the day seemed to pass until I saw that the sun was beginning to set. I had hoped we would be back before dark. "Should we try to hide behind one of these houses?" I asked. There looked to be some pretty flat areas I could drive on and pull up beside one of the houses or into the trees. "Good idea. I don't know if this road eventually comes to a dead end or circles back around," said Mrs. Barnes. I went past a couple hilly yards until I saw one that looked flat. The snow was undisturbed, so it would be obvious that we went this way, but we didn't know what the thought process was for the changed people. They obviously had some smarts in them, being able to drive, and with the coordination they've shown with the routes. It was a bumpy ride through the snow and into the backyard, where I turned the car and stopped behind the patio. I shut off the engine, and we rolled the windows down a little so we could listen for danger. At first, it was just the wind gusting through the trees. But then, we heard the sounds of a rapidly moving truck. We all waited for it to appear in the small section of road visible to us. When the truck went quickly past our line of sight, it thankfully kept going and didn't slow down where we had turned. The truck's engine noise began fading away, but it was replaced by another vehicle coming our way. We waited for it to drive past, and were caught off guard when it was followed by 2 additional cars. "This may be a good chance to get out of here," I said, but I was quickly proven wrong when another car drove by, and then another. "I guess we better wait in case there are more," said Jessica. After a couple of minutes, the truck that had been following us came back through again. It was going slower this time. As the minutes ticked by, the cars continued to regularly drive by from both directions. "We're going to have to wait them out," said Mrs. Barnes. "If we got stuck trying to get out of here, they would have us for sure." The sun had disappeared and the sky was growing darker and the air was getting even colder. I turned the car on, but didn't start it so we could put the windows back up and get a blast of heat through the car. After a few minutes, I turned it back off so the battery wouldn't run out. Mrs. Barnes radioed back to the house and told them that we were staying out for now and would let them know when things changed. Arvin had offered to get another group together to try to help us. We all agreed that it was a bad idea and declined the offer. I wanted to know what happened to Jessica and Trish, but I figured I would wait until we were safely back in the house. "I'll keep watch if anyone wants to try to sleep," I said. "This could be a long night." Unfortunately, I was right. The cars kept driving by every so often, and there wasn't any window of opportunity for us to try to escape. The hours went by slowly in silence, but I was happy that the others were able to sleep. I felt a tap on my shoulder around 2 in the morning. Mrs. Barnes whispered to me that she would take over watching, so I could go to sleep. Exhaustion had set in, and I was able to drift off pretty quickly. When I groggily opened my eyes again, the sun had come back up, and we were still safe in the car. Jessica and Mrs. Barnes were awake, but the others were still asleep. "There are less cars coming through now," Jessica whispered when she saw I was awake. "Maybe they ran out of gas," I said. I could see my breath in the freezing cold car. "Do you know how many there are?" "We've only seen 3 for the past hour or so," said Jessica. "Do you think we have a chance of getting out?" I asked. Jessica turned back to look at Mrs. Barnes and winced from the pain of her arm. "I think so. There seems to be a longer break after the red car goes by." We watched together as each car came by again. There was around 5 minutes between the red car and the truck coming back through. "Okay, I'll start it up next time the red car goes past us," I said. The car started right away when the red car went out of view, and I gave it a little gas to get going. The tyres spun in the snow and grass, but couldn't get traction. I went in reverse and then back forward to try to rock us out. "Turn off the traction control," said Mrs. Barnes. "Sometimes that makes things worse." I looked for the button in the console and finally found it and pressed it. After a couple more reverse and forward movements, we finally got going, and I carefully navigated us the rest of the way around the house. Once we were back on the street, I turned the traction control back on. I drove quickly back out the way we came and made it to the road leading us out of here. Then we finally made it back onto the road that would take us to the house. Mrs. Barnes told the others that we were finally on our way back. We drove quickly back through the snow, and I was relieved to park the car in the garage. I helped Jessica limp her way back into the house, and the others back at the house had set up a room and bed for her to lie down in. Trish had a few scratches on her face and arms, but other than that, she was good. It felt great to be back here with everyone else. Clara ran over and gave Ali a big hug as soon as she saw her, and someone had gotten some food ready for us. Ali ate quickly and then ran off to play with Clara. As I was eating and telling some of the others about our rescue trip, Ali came running back in. "Dad! A car just pulled into the driveway!"